video number 2 for this evening. So this is more about general geopolitics and perhaps a bit about Cheney as well. I basically can't stand the guy. I think he should be brought up for war crimes. But, as we all know, the highest criminals in office will never be prosecuted to the fullest extent, except if, some country is conquered and then justice proceeds in some way or another. And Cheney, has an undue amount of influence, especially in the Western media. It is completely laughable that anybody should even have this guy on regular news broadcasts, but that's the way it goes. Nobody is surprised by this. He, I'm not even going to say anything about his person. His it basically lies to the country, to the entire country. And this is not even a partisan issue here. What Cheney was all about was, let's put it this way, all the elites having more information than we do about about global energy supplies and so on. They know what's coming, okay? They know that our traditional energy supplies are eventually going to run out, or at least they're going to run short, and it's going to become very expensive in the near future. By near future, I'm saying within the next few decades, okay? Not tomorrow. Never mind the current oil price manipulations here. But this is basically known. Our natural resources on this globe, which we have used for the last 100 years or so, in terms of oil, gas, natural gas, all the traditional stuff that our modern life essentially depends on, is running out. These are non-renewable resources. And the scientific community knows this, the politicos know this, and so Cheney, being the forward thinker here, came up with his energy plan, which was all secret, of course. It was never, it was never told to the American people or anybody else that this is essentially, we're in the last stages here of global resource wars. And this is what this is all about. So essentially, Cheney and his buddies and his neocon friends, and the neocons in the Obama administration as well, they figure that American hegemony and supremacy over these supplies in all over the globe are essential to American living standards, European living standards, and so on. But they didn't tell you, what they didn't tell you is that many, many lives will have to be lost in order to gain or retain that advantage. And if essentially, if we want to keep our comfortable lifestyles, then you're going to have to be willing to kill a lot of people around all over the globe in order to maintain that kind of a lifestyle. Now, I'm a pretty humble person. I live in a one-bedroom apartment. I'm quite happy. I don't need to have a big amount of property. I don't really need to own the land that I live on. That's not even a question for me. What I want is running water. I want electricity when I need it. I don't need a new iPod or a new computer or the latest technology every year, and not even every 4 years. Okay, I don't need all this stuff. Basically what you would call planned obsolescence of things. Things are manufactured to break down more quickly because they're made out of cheap materials and so on. And so this whole consumerism mantra is constantly about more, 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 and we throw away more, more, more in order to produce more and more. This kind of thing is going to come to an end whether we like it or not. So Cheney's whole objective was to basically maintain this kind of living standard, at least for some segments of the American public, not all, not all, of course, as well as, in the Western world, to maintain that kind of lifestyle into perpetuity. And that is simply not going to happen, because this is not where reality is leading us towards. So we in the West need to curtail our conspicuous consumption, and that means us consumers at every level. I'm not talking about the people who already don't have anything to begin with. I'm talking about people like me who are being told that we need a new computer, a new iPod, whatever you want out there, that we need this kind of development every single year. That is just simply rubbish. We don't need this kind of technology simply for the sake of selling things and the kind of technology which is supposed to be so wonderful. Well, how wonderful is it really when Facebook and Google are all treating us basically like products to start with? It's not the products we purchase. We're becoming the products of these companies. And it's not very far-sighted, But I digress. So let's talk about the entire situation. This confrontational stance between the United States of America versus Russia versus China, and then getting the European continent involved in this entire mess as well. It is not exactly in the interest of the Europeans, Western Europeans included, to take a confrontational stance with Russia on their own continent. It makes absolutely no sense. The only segments that will benefit from any of this are the banking sector, basically the global elite, which controls the Western sector, and it makes no sense to base your European policy on a model which comes out of America to maintain this American hegemony over the entire globe. It won't benefit Europe, it won't benefit Russia, it won't benefit anyone except for America itself for a very short time, I might add. For a very short time. I don't understand this demonization of Russia, of Putin. Quite frankly, it's irrational. Putin is not exactly a what I would call a Democrat, with somebody that has democracy per se as his highest goal. But neither do the American elites. I mean, it is obvious by now who is steering the ship, and it certainly is not a government by the people anymore. It is a government which is being paid for and paid off by very wealthy elites. Some of them American, some of them global. So it's essentially a global problem. And it makes no sense for Europeans to, stay on this American bandwagon of confrontation with the entire globe when it's not to their own benefit in the end. Russia won't geographically move away, from the continent where they're located. And let's not forget, Germany. Germany essentially started a lot of shit with Russia, which wasn't necessary to start with, namely World War II in particular, you know. Russia has its own problems. The Soviet Union was a terrible regime. Nobody is even disputing this. But you have people everywhere that really want to get along. They don't want any confrontation. They don't want World War III, quite frankly. But this is where we're going to be headed if this confrontational stance is kept up. This confrontational stance, all it's done is to push Russia closer with China. And guess who holds the purse strings for America? Essentially, it's China. To some degree, Japan. But Japan has its own domestic problems now. Their economy isn't all that great. In view of the Fukushima disaster and all of that. So we're upholding essentially a very artificial system which can crumble at any moment. I mean, nobody knows really what is going to happen. But I would say most ordinary people across the globe do not want World War III. They do not want a military confrontation, and they also don't want to be clobbered with economic neoliberal policies which favor international conglomerate corporate government to the exclusion of citizen input. And this is what these new trade agreements and the sanctions against Russia, I might add, including this artificial manufactured drop in oil prices, which will greatly hurt Russia. It will greatly hurt Venezuela in terms of geopolitics in general. This is all going to have an impact, and all wars throughout humanity have had economic reasons and backgrounds. So don't believe for a moment that the rest of the world will simply stand by and let these neoliberal machinations, in order to control the globe, simply, take over their own nations, their own countries, the will of their own people, which is, to some degree taken seriously, to some degree not taken seriously. But this is a very complicated picture. All I'm asking my viewers is to understand that this ongoing situation with this continued rhetoric against the Russian Federation is completely counterproductive long term, and it's not going to do anybody any good. These increased hostilities, and especially the eastward push by NATO, to basically encircle Russia, is not good policy. It is very confrontational. I believe that Putin, for the most part, has done the right thing. He's not fallen into this trap of this, which they probably wanted him to fall into, namely increased aggression from his side. He has not, there's no proof of any Russian invasion into Ukraine or anything like that. Now, of course, Putin is going to use his own security forces in order to keep the Donbass area and the eastern Ukraine somewhat stable, because nobody likes a destabilized Ukraine, except perhaps the Americans, because for them, any turmoil in that country would actually work out into their favor. So, and I'm not saying I'm anti-American either. I'm just saying this, it's just completely stupid policy, long term. And I am really on board with the rest of the Europeans, particularly some segments in Western Germany, who are completely against the policy of Angela Merkel, and who's basically playing footsie with American expansionism in Europe, when in reality, she can have good relations with America as well as good relations with Russia. Why is that so difficult to understand? Why does this always need to take on a confrontational dimension when the United States is involved? It's like everything just exploded once the USSR collapsed. And everyone went into such a hubris mode over this thing as to, yeah, let's dump on your adversary and let's crush them. And once they were somewhat economically viable, let's crush them again. This is terrible. And not to mention the possibility now, because of all this increased hostility and militarism all over the place, that it becomes increasingly likely for one party or the other, by party I mean either the United States or Russia, to overreact to some insignificant incident which will bring about a global conflagration. This danger is increasing by the day. And I hope, most Americans realize that the Russian people, they aren't the Russian government necessarily. They're people just like us. Why demonize the Russian people, for heaven's sake? Why demonize the Chinese people? The history of humanity is very complicated, and one thing is for sure, it's always been marked by a measure of cooperation, but also by a large measure of hostility. An interspecies hostility, you might say. We're a very curious species, very curious. I'll end on that note tonight, but let's hope that cooler heads prevail, and that this ratchet up militarism is going to be curtailed somehow.